The day the money changed hands, the wind stopped moving across the prairie, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Everyone remembered that moment because it felt wrong in a quiet way, the kind of wrong that doesn't shout but sinks into your chest and stays there. A young woman stood by the fence line under a hard, bright sky, dust clinging to her skin, eyes lowered not in shame, but in exhaustion. Across from her was a man who believed payment meant ownership, who believed silence meant consent, and who had no idea that the lesson coming for him would be written slowly, patiently, and in full daylight, where everyone could see it. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and quiet strength that changes lives, take a second right now to like this video, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Journal. Stories like this live because people like you believe they matter. Her name was Maribel Torres, and she arrived at the ranch in the early morning, when the sun was still gentle and the shadows were long. She had come from a place where choices were thin and debts were thick, where helping family meant taking on burdens that did not belong to one person alone. The ride there had been silent, the road unspooling endlessly through fields and fences, and by the time she stepped onto the packed earth of the ranch yard, her heart felt like it had already run a long distance. She told herself this was temporary, that work was work, that dignity could be folded away and taken back out later, when things were safer. The ranch belonged to Colton Reeve, a man whose reputation traveled faster than his horses. He was known for paying cash, for not asking questions, and for reminding people, loudly and often, that money bought obedience. The buildings were solid and old, bleached by sun and wind, and everything smelled of hay, leather, and heat. Maribel noticed how the workers avoided Colton's eyes, how their movements were efficient but tense, like people who had learned to be careful with every step. She also noticed the way the land stretched open and honest around them, and how strange it felt that such a wide sky could still press down on a person. Maribel's days began before the sun climbed high and ended when the light softened again, the kind of long, bright days that left no place to hide. She worked with her hands until they ached, learning the rhythms of the ranch, the patience required by animals, the quiet intelligence of the land. What weighed on her most was not the labor, but the way Colton spoke about her, as if she were a tool he had purchased, rather than a person who had arrived with a history and a future. Each reminder that he had paid for her time landed like a stone, heavy and cold, and she learned to carry those stones without letting them break her posture. There were moments, though, small and bright, that kept her standing. Old Mrs. Hensley from the neighboring property would bring extra bread and leave it on the fence without a word. A ranch hand named Tobias would slow his pace when he noticed Maribel struggling, never making a show of it. The animals responded to her gentleness, and in their calm breathing and steady eyes, she found something like trust. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Maribel began to change, not by growing harder, but by growing clearer about who she was and what she would not surrender. Colton mistook her silence for submission, and that was his greatest error. He did not see the way Maribel watched everything, learning the patterns of the ranch and the people on it. He did not hear the conversations that floated on the air when he was not around. The complaints whispered, and the hopes barely spoken. Maribel understood that power did not always look like shouting, or fists, or threats. Sometimes it looked like patience, like listening, like waiting for the right moment to let the truth stand on its own. The turning point came on a day so ordinary it almost passed unnoticed. The sun was high, the cicadas loud, and the work moved along its usual path. Colton made another of his remarks, another reminder of money and control, and something in the air shifted. Maribel felt it as a tightening in her chest, then a release. She did not argue. She did not plead. She simply continued her work with a steadiness that drew eyes without demanding attention. By evening, word had spread among the workers, not through gossip, but through a shared understanding that something was different. Maribel began helping others in ways that seemed small, but added up quickly. She showed new hands how to avoid injuries, shared food when she could, and listened when people needed to talk, without fixing anything. She kept records quietly, noting hours worked and promises made, Understanding that truth written down had weight, she reached out beyond the ranch too, finding allies in places Colton never bothered to look. All of it happened in daylight, in plain sight, because Maribel had learned that shadows were where fear lived, and she was done feeding it. When the reckoning came, it did not arrive with sirens or shouting. It arrived with paperwork, with witnesses, with calm voices stating facts that could not be brushed aside. Colton stood in the same yard where he had once believed himself untouchable. And for the first time he was forced to listen. The money he had waved like a weapon turned into evidence of wrongdoing, of contracts violated, of people treated as less than human. The lesson was not delivered by Maribel alone, but by a community that had found its spine. Maribel watched it all with a strange mix of relief and sadness. She did not feel triumph so much as a deep exhale, a sense that something heavy had finally been set down. The ranch did not disappear, and the work did not end, but the rules changed. Fairness replaced fear, and respect replaced silence. People stood straighter, laughed more easily, and the land seemed to breathe again under the wide, honest sky. In the weeks that followed, Maribel stayed, not because she had to, but because she chose to. She helped rebuild trust where it had been eroded, and encouraged others to claim their voices. She learned that second chances were not just something you received, but something you could help create for others. The prairie looked different to her now, not as an endless test, but as a place of possibility, where hard days could still lead to better ones. As the season shifted and the light changed, Maribel prepared to move on. She had saved enough, planned carefully, and dreamed quietly. On her last morning, the sun rose the same way it always had, warm and generous. She walked the fence line one more time, feeling the earth solid beneath her boots, knowing she was leaving stronger than she had arrived. The lesson that had been taught here would outlast her presence, carried in the way people treated one another and in the knowledge that dignity was not for sale. If this story has reached you in a personal way, if it reminded you of your own strength or someone who helped you find it, take a moment now to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Journal. Your engagement keeps stories like this alive. Before the ending, we have one special request for you. Please comment with a single word that describes what this story made you feel, because your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Maribel left the ranch at midday, the sun bright and unwavering, carrying with her the quiet truth that no one could ever truly own another human being. The prairie stretched behind her, wide and open, holding the memory of a lesson learned the hard way and never forgotten.